Hello. So this is the next part of the cells booklet, which is all about cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems. So in biology, there's so many different levels of organization. Now the reason for this is organisms and populations can go literally from cell the whole way up to the entire biosphere, so all the living things on Earth. So it's important that they're organized in some way. So if you have a look at this bit, this is what we're going to be covering. How cells are organized into tissues, which are then organized into organs, then organ systems, and then organisms. So we're literally just focusing on this little bit. This little part is more to do with ecology. So as we've said, cells can be organized into different structures. So cells are the basic building blocks of living organisms. All living things are made of cells. Cells can be grouped together to form tissues. Now a tissue is a group of cells with similar structures and functions. Organs are groups of tissues with similar functions. Now they might be grouped together to carry out a particular function. Organ systems then are groups of organs which are grouped together to again carry out a particular function. And organisms then are made up of different organ systems. So let's have a look at some examples of this. What type of cells do we have? Well, we could have heart cells, we could have nerve cells, we could have blood cells, you could have skin cells. So there's loads. Tissues then are groups of cells with similar structures and functions. So we could have nervous tissue. We could have liver tissue. There's lots of different things. We could even have like the retina in the back of your eye, which would be a tissue because it's a group of similar cells to carry out a particular function. Organs then, we could basically name any organ in your body. So your heart, your lungs, your liver, your ileum, your colon, your stomach, your esophagus. There's tons. Organ systems then could be things like your circulatory system, respiratory, reproductive, excretory, hormonal, nervous. So there's loads. But organ systems are when organs are grouped together. And then finally, organisms is basically whenever you group together different organ systems and they make up an organism. So just to summarize, the cells are the microscopic building blocks of living things. Tissues are similar cells with the same structure grouped together. Organs is when several tissue types are grouped together to carry out a particular function, like for example the heart or leaf. Organ systems are a group of organs that operate together to carry out a particular function, for example the circulatory system or the respiratory system. And an organism then is all the organ systems grouped together to make a complex organism. And then here's three examples of them. So we've got an organ system. The first one is the nervous system. Its job is to respond to stimuli and make responses. And the main organs in that are the brain, spinal cord, receptors, and effectors. And these are all ones that we're going to look at over the course of the GCSE course. For these systems to be able to work, they have to be made up of specialised cells. So this part shows some specialised cells and how they're special. Or, in other words, what adaptations do they have? So basically, how are they designed to be good at their job? So first one is red blood cells. Instead of just being a circle shape like that, like a big blob, they are biconcave, which means that they have this sort of shape and it allows them to carry more oxygen. and they also contain hemoglobin. A neuron, which is a nerve cell, is longer than any other cell in the body, and it's got many extensions. A sperm cell has a tail, so it can swim to the egg, which not many other cells in the body have. A root hair cell in plant roots have long extensions, so they can absorb more water and minerals from the soil. And ciliated epithelial cells have little cilia on their surface to waft to and fro and help to remove any bacteria from airways. So the next little part of this then, if these are all specialised cells, where did they actually come from? Well, they came from these stem cells. And here you can see a couple of little animations about stem cells. So we can see here in this one that the stem cells just start off as normal animal cells, but then they're all changing into different types. This one here shows that stem cells can be used to repair damaged organs or broken bones. They can be implanted into organs and change into different cells and help repair problems. This one actually shows that stem cells can be used to grow entirely new organs. So, what is a stem cell? Stem cells are unspecialised cells which can divide by mitosis and change into different types of specialised cells. So at the start, they're just plain old looking animal cells. So they're unspecialised. They've got no real job. But then they can divide by mitosis and change into different types of specialised cells. So here we've got a little lump of stem cells. They can be changed and grow into muscle cells, blood cells, nerve cells, cardiac cells, and liver cells. And as well as that, intestinal cells. So basically, everyone starts off life as just this big bundle of stem cells. Nothing special about them. But then as they grow into an embryo and then a fetus, the stem cells start to differentiate and form all these different types of cells, each with their own job to do. Now, in humans and animals, there are two types of cells. There is embryonic and adult stem cells. So let's have a little look at each one. Embryonic stem cells are undifferentiated cells found in early animal embryos, which is why they're called embryonic stem cells. You'll notice the first part is embryo, and they can form any cell type. These cells can be extracted from early embryos not used in fertility treatments or from the umbilical cord and placenta. They grow very rapidly and are very easy to culture, which means that they're very easy to grow in a lab. Adult stem cells are also unspecialised cells, but they're only found in certain organs in adults, for example, bone marrow, blood, and heart tissue. However, they can only be used to produce certain types of tissue. For example, only cells from the bone marrow can be used to grow blood cells, and they're more difficult to grow and culture. So if we summarise that, embryonic stem cells grow rapidly, are easy to culture, and can change into any cell type. And they are also easy to extract. Adult stem cells, on the other hand, are more difficult to extract because you've got to get them from the bone marrow. There's usually less of them available. So for example, if you compare the amount that you would get in an embryo compared to the amount that you get in bone marrow, you get way more in an embryo. They're also more difficult to grow, and they can't change into any cell type. Mostly, blood stem cells can only form different blood cells. A third type of stem cells then are found in plants. Now, obviously plant stem cells can only be used in plants, but they are found in the apical growing points or meristems at the end of shoots and roots. So apical meristems are basically parts of the plant which grows, which is the shoot and the root. The cells they produce retain the ability to divide until they are in their final position in the root, stem or leaf, which has allowed scientists to develop cloning techniques to produce large numbers of genetically identical plants in a short time. So, using this example here, you could actually cut out part of a plant, you could treat it with the correct hormones, and it will actually grow in to a separate plant. So first of all, it'll grow roots, and then it'll start to grow a new shoot until eventually you could basically have an entirely new plant out of the bit which you had chopped out. So this little bit could grow into an entirely new plant. Now, another amazing thing about stem cells is that they can be used in medicine. Now, in this case, we're talking about animal or human stem cells. So they can be used to treat leukemia, which is cancer of white blood cells, by transferring new bone marrow. And we're actually going to look at that one in more detail. So it can be used to treat leukemia. It can be used to produce new nervous tissue to treat Parkinson's disease or paralysis due to spinal injuries. It can be used to build new bone tissue or cartilage to repair damaged joints. It can produce new immune cells which can fight disease. It can produce replacement organs that match the patient's tissue type, which means that there's less chance of them rejecting the organ after a transplant. And also it can be used to help treat genetic diseases. So there's several examples here. I would make sure that you know at least 3 of these. And the bits that I've highlighted are the best bits that you should learn. Now, how are stem cells used to treat leukemia? Before we do this, we need to know a little bit about leukemia. So leukemia is cancer of your white blood cells. If somebody has leukemia, their white blood cells don't function properly and they can't fight disease. This picture here shows red blood cells surrounded by a white blood cell. Or I should say that was the other way around. White blood cells surrounded by red blood cells. Now the amazing thing about leukemia and how it's treated is you can actually treat somebody with leukemia if you take stem cells from a healthy matching donor and you can inject them into their bone marrow, and the person with leukemia will actually start to fight off that cancer. So here's how it happens. They take a stem cell from the healthy matching person's bone marrow. They extract them using a big needle and they grow more stem cells in a lab. So this little part shows them being cultured, which is grown in a lab. They then inject the stem cells into the bone marrow of a leukemia patient, and the new blood cells grow inside the patient. Now, here's how they extract the bone marrow. So they basically use ultrasound to direct this big needle into the pelvis where you find spongier bone, and that's where the bone marrow is produced. This is it in real life. Sorry if you're squeamish. So, here's how leukemia, or how stem cells are used to treat leukemia. And these are the main steps. Firstly, the person with cancer gets chemotherapy and radiotherapy to destroy any cancerous blood cells in the patient. The point of this step is it removes the cancerous white blood cells. Now, this is quite an important step because you want to try and stop the cancer cells from growing. It's also a bit of a tricky situation for the cancer patient to be in, because it means that once all their white blood cells have been destroyed, they basically have no immune system. So they might have to stay in hospital or stay at home for a couple of months so they don't pick up any infections, because they could actually get a really bad cold or a really bad flu and they wouldn't be able to fight it off. So the first step is killing all the cancerous cells. The effect of this is that the patient's bone marrow stops producing new blood cells. Now that means they stop producing cancerous cells altogether. So the next part is the patient is given a transplant of bone marrow containing stem cells from a matching healthy donor. When those stem cells are injected into the patient's bone marrow, the donor stem cells will multiply and produce healthy blood cells in the patient. So in a way, what you're trying to do as a result of this is get all of the patient's cancerous blood cells, kill them and stop them producing new ones, and replace them with healthy stem cells from somebody else's bone marrow. That bone marrow will then contain stem cells, which will divide and produce new blood cells, and hopefully, if everything goes to plan, that means that they will be cured from leukemia. Now, of course, that's a risky treatment. Here's some of the reasons why it's risky. Firstly, chemotherapy and radiotherapy destroys a patient's white blood cell before the stem cell transplant. So that means that they've got no immune system and they're in danger of infections. Second of all, the stem cells may divide in an uncontrolled way and produce tumours or unwanted cell types. And of course, because you're moving cells from one place to another, there's ethical issues. So some people think that this treatment is wrong. Even though it's being used to treat somebody with leukemia, people think it's wrong. And here's why. If you use embryonic stem cells, some people think that because that embryo could grow into a person, it may be considered murder. The human rights of the embryo are also ignored because it doesn't get a choice. Some people may also be opposed on religious grounds and feel that scientists are playing God. And finally then, it may lead to cloning and designer babies. And that's the end of cells. It has been an absolute pleasure.